Welcome to episode 309 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing filmmaker Jon Sweets, who just did a sci-fi film called 3022 starring Omar Epps. We talked through this film and how it all came together for him, so stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 309. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing filmmaker Jon Sweets. Here is the interview. Welcome, Jon, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So you were on the SYS podcast before a couple of years ago in episode number 44, so I will refer people back to that and link to it in the show notes so they can kind of get your backstory. But today, let's dig into your latest film, 3022, starring Miranda Cosgrove and Omar Epps. To start out, maybe you can give us a quick pitch or logline. What is this film all about?
So it's a film about what kind of happens when you're basically the last 4 humans left alive. So you're on, a space station and you see Earth blow up. And then it sort of goes into those sort of existential crises of like, do we try to live? Is it worth trying to live? What is there to live for? And every kind of character handles it differently, and things kind of devolve from there. So yeah, that's the basic premise.
Okay, perfect. How did you get involved with this project? It's another writer, Ryan Bonaco, wrote the script. Maybe just walk through that process. Was this an idea that you had? You hired Ryan to write it? Was it a spec script that he came to you with? Maybe just talk about it, sort of how you got involved with this screenplay.
Yeah, so I actually found it, it might have been 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 5, where I was on the Blacklist website where like the database where you just read a bunch of screenplays, and I go on there a lot and just sort of read log lines and try to find material, and came across this log line and was really fascinated by it and read the script, and it was very different at the time, but I loved it. And so I contacted Ryan Bonaco, the writer, and he at the time was based out of Sweden. His wife is Swedish, and so when I contacted him, we talked for a while, and I didn't end up optioning it in time, and he optioned it to someone else. And so when I approached him on the option, he's like, "Oh, I just had optioned it," and then they kept the rights for 3 years. And meanwhile, I'd gone on and made some other movies and directed the movie Pandemic, I think, after that, and then I kind of took a break from movies for a while. My second kid had just been born, and so I've been more directing commercials and branded content. And then started to miss movies again, so started thinking of old scripts I'd read that I loved and wanted to make, and immediately the first one that came to mind was 3022, and I contacted Ryan, and the option that the other company had for 3 years had just expired a couple months prior, so it was perfect timing, and we talked about it, and then worked on the script a bunch together and got it ready, and went out and put it all together.
And perfect. And so I'm curious, you mentioned you found it on the Blacklist. What do you look for when you're using the Blacklist? I know a lot of writers listening to this podcast certainly use the Blacklist, and there's always these scores. Are you just purely looking at the log lines? Do the scores and the feedback that writers make available, does that influence your decision? Maybe give us a little sort of inside, baseball on how a producer uses the Blacklist.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody has their own process. But for me, what I would do is I would just read a ton of log lines, and then if a log line was interesting to me, I would click on it, and then that's when I would start to look at the other things. I would see, like, did it have script reviews? Because if it did have, the thing I cared more so probably than the reviews was the coverage. I really liked when a script had coverage and I could read and kind of get a sense of it from the coverage, and so that was helpful to me. And I also would look at the reviews as well, because if you see, a few low ones, you're like, oh, maybe this isn't worth my time. But I'd say, so first though, it's just kind of, looking at log lines, and usually I would pick a genre that I'm interested in, or what I was reading tons and tons of log lines, and then clicking on them and kind of going through that process. And and it also would help if it had something like, quarter finalists and Nichols, or, blank contest and things like that. Just you're looking for reasons to go to the next step. So a lot of times, like, a strong log line is crucial, obviously, and that's the first piece. But then after that, there was like a whole set of criteria that would be like, do I go to the next step? And then the next step would be I'd read a few pages and then decide if I wanted to read the rest of it. So definitely having strong first 10 pages is extremely important.
Yeah. How much does the actual interfacing with the writer count towards these things? Just in other words, if you email, if you get on a phone with them, and just something seems a little weird, or they don't seem that easy to get along with, how much does that impact? Have you ever had a script that you really, really, really liked, but once you talked to the writer, you just thought, this seems like he could be difficult?
Not really. What I'm more say happens, because I've definitely run into that, and truth be told, with Ryan, I had to really convince him to let me option the script. But we're friends now. We've known each other for years. But at the time, it was there's people being like, "Oh, we're going to make it a $30 million movie," and that sort of stuff, and that sounded more appealing.
Sure.
But we since have worked together a bunch of years and stuff like that, and so it was fun to finally get to make this movie together, because that's how we initially met. And he moved to the States, and he's now in Los Angeles. But what I more so would say can be off-putting than, like, once I've read a script, if I like it and I want it, like, it doesn't matter how difficult a personality seems or different or stuff like that, because I want the script, because that's the content is definitely king there. But what I would say can be a turn off is if this isn't necessarily happened on the Blacklist site, but I've had things where, let's say someone's submitted a screenplay or something, and I go like, cool, or like a lookbook and a log line and a little thing. I'm like, cool, I'd love to read the screenplay, and then they say like, oh, well, before I send it to you, I need you to sign this NDA, blah blah blah. I usually don't. That's usually like the end of the conversation, because that, to me, it feels a little green, kind of, and it's not saying people shouldn't be safe, but there's, it just feels like an extra step, and I'm always kind of like, I don't know if I want to keep talking to this person, just to be honest. Like, that's more so off-putting. Like, before I've read the script, if someone's making it difficult for me to read the script, then that's usually, I'm like, that it's not worth it to me to try to read the script, I'd say. But after I've read the script, if I like it, it doesn't matter how difficult they're being. I'm going to try to get it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, perfect. That's great advice, and again, I hope writers are listening to that, because I often get writers asking, "Oh, should I make the producer sign an NDA?" And my advice is always don't do that, for precisely what you're saying. Why are you creating hurdles to have people read your material? So it's good to hear from the horse's mouth. Okay, so let's talk about the actual screenplay for this. So you find it on the Blacklist. What are some specific things that you really liked about Ryan's writing that just really got you engaged and fired up to go and try and option this one, especially because it must have made an impact, the fact that you kept coming back to it after all these years?
Yeah, it really did. I think Ryan's writing in general, and I used him on a bunch of other things to do, like script doctoring type things and stuff like that, and actually even some on commercials and stuff like that. And but what I like about his writing is it felt like he has a very strong voice. It felt like he knows his craft. The dialogue, I mean, obviously, when you're first reading a script, dialogue is the thing you're paying the most attention to. Like, do each characters have their own voice? Does it feel fluid? Is it not too expositional? All that sort of stuff. And I think Ryan's got a real, anyway, I really like his style and how he writes. And immediately reading it, I'm like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing, And then additionally, like I really like the concept and how things evolved and throughout the script. And what I'd say is, what's funny is the current movie is pretty dark, but the original script was much more dark even. So I like darker material, but it was even, I was like, I think just a smidge of some hope in the script, a little bit, and so that was one of the things I know that we worked on, those sort of things. But I think he has like a cool, unique voice and way he approaches writing, and I've read a lot of his other material that's also super strong and interesting, and but it's definitely it's if there, I'd say the biggest hiccup for me, the dialogue isn't working. Like that's the thing immediately where I'm like, I don't know if I want to keep going. So because at that point I still don't know if the story is working or the characters or any of that sort of stuff. But if I love a concept and I start reading and the dialogue's bad, I'll usually not get past page 5.
Yeah. I got you. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other changes. You mentioned that his version was maybe a little darker than what you ultimately wanted to have. What were some of the other changes that you needed to make to the script? And even just stuff, I'm always just curious to hear if there's just, logistical stuff or budgetary reasons. I'm always curious just to kind of hear about that. It sounds like other people were offering him, we're going to make this movie for $30 million. So clearly that would be a different script than probably what you guys ended up with. But any of the changes, I'm always just curious to hear kind of what changed to get it actually into production.
Yeah, so it's funny though, between the $30 million version and the sub-$1 million version, we it's actually this. I didn't change anything production wise, like that's I'm always, and that was I had to really, really sell Ryan on that I could do it because he was not convinced, because it was extremely challenging. We ended up having to build sets like in parking lots and stuff like that. It was a lot of in shoot rather than on sound stages because we couldn't get the right sound stages. Like, there's a lot of logistical challenges that came into it, but I always believe that for every $30 million version there is the sub-$1 million version of that. And so more so from a logistics thing, I think the original script was like 120 some, and the one we ultimately shot was 95, I think. So there's just initially things like that of just trying to get the page count down, because every the way I look at it, every page is about 2 hours of shoot time, roughly, and if you can cut 5 or 6 pages, that's like you get a day more to shoot, So there's a lot of that stuff. And beyond that, it was working a lot on the sort of characters, the arcs, figuring out just some of the pacing, stuff like that, and finding ways to make it so that it fits both of our sensibilities. Because it's not to say that anything was wrong with the initial version. It's just that there's some ways that I wanted to try to approach things differently, and Ryan's a great collaborator, and we're able to kind of, I think got it to a good place, or a place I feel good about it after kind of working together on it for a while.
Perfect. So at what point during this process do you get distribution in place? Was that early in the process when you optioned the script from him? Do you go through, make the movie, then get distribution? Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the times the ways it goes now is, you try to get some deals in beforehand, and that's definitely what I try to do on this one, trying to get at least some of the deals in, and, to sort of help you with getting the rest of the movie together. So it's kind of combination of things there, and but I had relationships from previous films I'd made, and it'd been interesting because I'd taken a couple of years off, so coming back and going back into the marketplace, it was funny to see that it had changed a bunch again. Because you sort of always think like, oh, maybe this is now the new normal, but the new normal is always changing. So that was cool, but I was able to rely on some my previous relationships and stuff like that to kind of get all the pieces in place and do it that way.
And so when you talk about deals, and we don't need necessarily the specifics, but you're talking about you get the distributor and he's able to sell rights in the UK and Germany, and that gives you some upfront money to help pay for the actual production. Those are the sorts of deals you're talking about?
Things like that, or
pre-sales.
the foreign side asking some sort of MG pre-sale type thing that you can use, like the contracts for stuff. And it's not that you get the money up front, but that you're able to have a contract so you can use that to to work on financing and stuff like that. So it's a kind of combination of things, and but yeah, that essentially something like that.
Okay, perfect. How much do you think genre impacted your ability to get these MGs to do some of this pre-selling? Sci-fi is always a genre that seems to travel internationally, but maybe you can talk about that a little bit. How much did that impact your decision to go with this particular story, and how much ultimately do you think it actually helped you?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a lucky thing in that, like, I really like science fiction, and I've actually been really wanting to make a spaceship movie. Like, I know it sounds silly, but I just was really, really wanted to make a spaceship movie. It sounded like a cool challenge, but you know, luckily, like, elevated sci-fi seems to have a healthy presence internationally, and so I obviously knew that beforehand too, and I know kind of the rough value of a movie and how all those elements work together. But it was definitely a thing where I think genre is crucial, obviously, to the value of your project. Like, people always hate when I say this, but the way to think of a drama is that a drama is not worth any money. You know, it doesn't mean that there's not exceptions to the rule, but if you're thinking of it as, like, you know, statistically, if you're making a drama, it doesn't mean you're not going to get it distributed, but you're not going to get minimum guarantees, and it's you know, it's very difficult to make money. So that's obviously, unless you have certain level of talent involved and things like that. But so that can always be a hiccup. So but sci-fi, what's nice about it, or you know, why it seems to be working at the moment, is that, you know, there's a lot more people making movies. So you're trying to look at ways of how do you distinguish yourself so that your movie can have more value. So for example, you know, horror movies obviously, or thrillers, have had this presence internationally for a long time, but essentially anybody can even take an iPhone or something and make a horror movie. You know, you can find a creepy house and shoot it, and if you're talented, you can make something cool. So when you go into the sci-fi space, it puts you in a different place where not everybody's going to be able to, like, build a whole spaceship set. So right there, it already sort of narrows down how many films you're competing against sort of in that international space. And then additionally, it's about cast on top of that, because if you're doing a horror movie, it's true that anybody can shoot a horror movie and find a creepy house, but not everybody can get an elevated cast in that situation. So then if you get names in a horror movie, that's how you can give value to it. And similarly, in a sci-fi film, you know, there's all these sort of components, and that's just one of them. You're trying to look at, like, how do you stand out from the thousands and thousands of movies that are being made. So if you have no names and you're making a horror movie or a drama, there's a lot of those movies being made, you know, and that unfortunately puts you in a position where your movie has to be that much more special in order to stand out.
Yeah. Sound advice. Yeah, thank you for that. That's excellent advice, and a good description of kind of how all this works. How can people see 3022? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Yeah, so it comes out on November 22nd. It's playing in select cities and theaters, and it's also a sort of day and date where it's going to be on video on demand, and you know, all the Apple stuff and DirecTV and all those different places. So kind of everywhere, November 22nd. And
Perfect.
Not sure all the cities, but playing some cities and theaters as well then.
Okay, perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes.
I'm super lame, and I sort of stopped at Facebook. So I don't have the best social media presence, I guess, but I'm on Facebook. So there's that, I guess. But yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So you got a few hundred friend requests coming your way. Then I'll link to
that. Great.
So well, thank you, John. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Good luck with this film, and I look forward to talking to you about your next film.
All right. Thanks. Likewise.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketing, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. So this will be the last episode of the year. As I'm recording this, I'm literally just a couple of days away from beginning production on my horror mystery thriller feature that I've been talking about for the last couple of months. So hopefully everybody has a good holiday, and the podcast will return normally early in January. So keep an eye out for that episode coming up, and I will have a big update once the production is over. And we're going to be ending, our last day of shooting is December 21st, so I should have a few days there to prepare the episode and hopefully get one out early in January. Anyways, happy holidays, and I'll see everybody in the new year. Thank you for listening.